In the dark and desperate days of the Second World War, when the fate of nations hung in the balance, a curious weapon emerged from the shadows of British ingenuity. It was a rifle that defied convention, a firearm that looked more like a toy than a tool of war. Small, almost delicate in its appearance, it was a weapon that whispered death, a silent instrument of destruction that would become the stuff of nightmares for German soldiers and a symbol of audacious resistance for those who wielded it. This is the story of a rifle that made its victims vanish without a sound, a weapon that, in its quiet lethality, became a legend. Historical background. The early years of the Second World War were a time of unprecedented crisis for Great Britain. The fall of France in 1940 left the island nation standing alone against the might of the Nazi war machine. The British Expeditionary Force had been driven from the continent, and the threat of invasion loomed large. In this crucible of desperation, conventional thinking was not enough. The nation needed a new kind of warfare, a new breed of warrior, and new, unconventional weapons to fight back. It was in this atmosphere of existential threat that Prime Minister Winston Churchill famously called for the creation of a secret army, a force that would set Europe ablaze. This led to the formation of the Special Operations Executive, or SOE, a clandestine organization tasked with conducting espionage, sabotage, and reconnaissance in occupied Europe. The SOE was to be a force of ghost warriors, operating in the shadows, striking at the heart of the enemy and then melting away into the darkness. But to fight in the shadows, the SOE needed weapons that were as unconventional as its methods. They needed firearms that were not only effective but also discreet, weapons that would allow their agents to eliminate targets without raising an alarm, to sow chaos and fear without revealing their presence. The search was on for a silent killer, a weapon that could strike with the quiet lethality of an assassin's blade but from a safe distance. Creation of the weapon. The answer to the SOE's needs did not come from a government arsenal or a major arms manufacturer. It came from the mind of a quiet and unassuming engineer named William Godfrey Delisle. Working for the Air Ministry, Delisle was a man of quiet brilliance, a tinkerer and an innovator who, in his spare time, enjoyed shooting rabbits and other small game on the Berkshire Downs. But this was wartime, and even a weekend hobby could spark an idea of military significance. Delisle, like many of his countrymen, was driven by a desire to contribute to the war effort in any way he could. He began to experiment with the idea of a silenced firearm, a weapon that could be used for poaching, but also, he imagined, for more clandestine purposes. His first prototype was a modified .22 caliber Browning semi-automatic rifle. It was a crude affair, but it was remarkably quiet. In 1943, Delisle took his invention to Major Sir Malcolm Campbell of Combined Operations, a secretive branch of the British military that was closely involved with the SOE. Campbell was a man who understood the value of unconventional thinking. He was intrigued by Delisle's creation and suggested a rather unorthodox test of its capabilities. From the roof of the New Adelphi building in London, overlooking the River Thames, Delisle fired his silenced rifle into the water below. On the streets of the city, life went on as usual. No one looked up, no one flinched, no one even seemed to notice the quiet thud of the rifle. The test was a resounding success. Combined Operations was impressed, but they needed a weapon with more stopping power than a .22 caliber rifle. They requested a version chambered in 9mm, the standard pistol cartridge of the British and German armies. Delisle, however, had other ideas. He believed that the American .45 ACP cartridge, a slower, heavier bullet, was the ideal choice for a silenced weapon. Its subsonic velocity meant that it wouldn't create a sonic boom as it traveled through the air, a key factor in achieving true silence. After a failed attempt at a 9mm version, Delisle was finally given the green light to develop his .45 caliber carbine. The result was a weapon that was not only incredibly quiet but also surprisingly accurate. In official tests, the Delisle carbine, as it came to be known, registered a mere 85.5 decibels, a sound level comparable to the clapping of hands. In a world of thunderous battlefield noise, the Delisle was a whisper. Design and function. The Delisle carbine was a masterpiece of clever engineering, a hybrid weapon that combined the best elements of several existing firearms. The action was taken from the reliable Lee-Enfield Mk3, the standard-issue rifle of the British Army. This gave the carbine a familiar and robust feel, but that was where the similarities ended. The barrel was a modified version of the one used in the American Thompson submachine gun, chosen for its compatibility with the .45 ACP cartridge. But the real genius of the Delisle lay in its integrated silencer, a large, cylindrical tube that enveloped the barrel and extended far beyond the muzzle. This silencer was a marvel of acoustic engineering. It was a multi-chambered design, with a series of baffles that disrupted the flow of hot, expanding gases from the fired cartridge, slowing them down and cooling them before they could exit the weapon and create a loud report. The barrel itself was also ported, with a series of small holes drilled along its length, which allowed some of the gases to bleed off into the silencer before the bullet even left the barrel. The combination of the subsonic .45 ACP round and the highly efficient silencer made the Delisle one of the quietest firearms ever produced. The only sound it made was the quiet click of the bolt as the shooter cycled the action to chamber a new round. This manual, bolt-action design was a deliberate choice. A semi-automatic weapon would have been faster, but the sound of the reciprocating bolt and the ejection of the spent cartridge would have compromised the weapon's stealth. With the Delisle, the operator had complete control over the noise they made. They could fire a shot and then wait, in absolute silence, before choosing to chamber the next round. The carbine was fed from a modified magazine from a Colt M1911 pistol, a clever bit of improvisation that made use of readily available components. The result was a weapon that was not only quiet but also reliable and easy to maintain. It was a strange-looking firearm, with its long, fat silencer giving it a somewhat comical appearance, but in the hands of a skilled operator, it was a deadly and terrifyingly effective tool of silent killing. SOE and resistance missions. The Delisle carbine was never intended for conventional warfare. It was a specialist's weapon, designed for the shadowy world of espionage and covert operations. Its primary users were the British commandos and the agents of the Special Operations Executive. These were the men who parachuted behind enemy lines, who worked with local resistance groups, who sabotaged infrastructure, and who eliminated high-value targets. For these ghost warriors, the Delisle was the perfect weapon. It allowed them to take out sentries without raising an alarm, to assassinate key enemy personnel from a safe distance, and to conduct raids and ambushes with a level of stealth that was previously unimaginable. In occupied France, SOE agents and members of the French resistance used the Delisle to great effect. They would strike at night, eliminating German guards on bridges and railway lines, allowing them to plant their explosives and then disappear into the darkness before the enemy even knew what had happened. The silent crack of the Delisle became a symbol of hope for the oppressed and a sound of terror for the occupiers. In the dense jungles of Burma, the Delisle was used by British special forces to hunt Japanese soldiers. The quietness of the weapon was a huge advantage in the close-quarters fighting of the jungle, where the sound of a conventional rifle shot could give away a soldier's position to the entire enemy platoon. With the Delisle, British soldiers could pick off Japanese sentries one by one, creating confusion and panic in the enemy ranks. The Delisle was a weapon of whispers, a tool of silent rebellion. Its use was not widespread, and its impact on the grand strategic scale of the war was small. But for the men and women who fought in the shadows, for the secret agents and the resistance fighters, it was an invaluable asset, a weapon that gave them a fighting chance against a much more powerful enemy. Operations against Nazi officers. While many of the missions involving the Delisle carbine were small-scale acts of sabotage and harassment, there were also times when it was used to strike at the very heart of the Nazi regime. The SOE's primary mission was to disrupt the enemy's war machine, and one of the most effective ways to do that was to eliminate key personnel, the officers and officials who kept the machine running. One such operation, shrouded in the secrecy of the SOE's clandestine world, is said to have taken place in the summer of 1944, in the lead-up to the D-Day landings. A team of Jedburghs, the elite special forces units of the SOE, were tasked with assassinating two high-ranking German officers who were responsible for the coastal defenses in a key sector of Normandy. The mission was fraught with danger. The officers were heavily guarded, and their headquarters was a fortified chateau surrounded by minefields and machine gun nests. A conventional assault would have been suicidal. But the Jedburghs had a secret weapon, the Delisle carbine. Under the cover of darkness, the team slipped through the German lines, their faces blackened with soot, their movements as silent as the night itself. They reached the perimeter of the chateau and, using the Delisle, they began to pick off the German sentries, one by one. The quiet thud of the carbine was lost in the chirping of the crickets and the rustling of the leaves in the wind. The German soldiers fell without a sound, their comrades unaware that they were being systematically eliminated. With the perimeter secured, the Jedburghs infiltrated the chateau and, with the same cold, silent efficiency, they dispatched the 2 German officers in their beds. The mission was a complete success. The German command structure in the sector was thrown into chaos, and the coastal defenses were significantly weakened in the days leading up to the Allied invasion. This was just one of many such operations, most of which will never be known to the public. The Delisle was a weapon of deniable assassination, a tool for removing the enemy's leaders without leaving a trace. It was a weapon that struck fear into the hearts of the Nazi elite, a silent reminder that they were never truly safe, that death could come for them at any time, from any direction, without a sound. Psychological impact. The physical impact of the Delisle carbine, while significant in the small-scale operations in which it was used, was dwarfed by its psychological impact. The fear of the unknown is a powerful weapon, and the Delisle was the embodiment of that fear. For the German soldiers on sentry duty in the cold, dark nights of occupied Europe, the Delisle was a terrifying prospect. They knew that at any moment, a silent bullet could come out of the darkness and snuff out their life without a sound. They would hear no gunshot, see no muzzle flash, just the quiet thud of the bullet hitting its target, and then the chilling silence. This constant, gnawing fear had a debilitating effect on the morale of the German troops. It made them jumpy and paranoid, their eyes constantly scanning the shadows, their ears straining to hear a sound that would never come. It made them less effective as soldiers, their attention diverted from their duties by the ever-present fear of a silent, unseen enemy. The legend of the Delisle grew with each telling. Stories circulated among the German troops of a ghost rifle, a weapon that killed without a sound, a phantom that haunted the night. The carbine became a bogeyman, a symbol of the unseen and ever-present threat of the resistance. The psychological impact of the Delisle extended all the way up the German chain of command. The assassinations of high-ranking officers, carried out with such chilling efficiency, sent a clear message to the Nazi leadership: you are not safe. The Delisle was a weapon of terror, but it was a terror that was directed not at the innocent, but at the architects of tyranny. It was a weapon that turned the tables on the oppressors, a silent reminder that even in the darkest of times, the spirit of resistance could not be extinguished. Legacy. When the war finally came to an end, the Delisle carbine, like many of the secret weapons of the SOE, was withdrawn from service and locked away in the armories of the British government. Its existence was a closely guarded secret, its story known only to the handful of men who had used it in the shadows. But legends have a way of enduring, and the story of the silent rifle that had terrorized the Nazis began to leak out. It became a thing of whispers and rumors, a half-forgotten tale of a ghost weapon from a secret war. In the years that followed, the Delisle would occasionally reappear, its silent lethality called upon once more in the conflicts that flared up in the twilight of the British Empire. It was used in the Malayan Emergency, in the Korean War, and, it is rumored, in the clandestine operations of the SAS in Northern Ireland. But its true legacy lies not in the number of enemies it killed, but in the symbol it became. The Delisle carbine is a testament to the power of ingenuity and innovation in the face of overwhelming odds. It is a reminder that in war, the most effective weapons are not always the biggest or the loudest. Today, the Delisle is a collector's item, a rare and valuable piece of military history. But it is more than just a museum piece. It is a symbol of a time when a small island nation stood alone against a monstrous tyranny, a time when a handful of brave men and women, armed with a strange and silent rifle, fought back in the shadows and helped to change the course of history. In war, appearances can deceive, and sometimes the smallest weapon changes history. The Welrod pistol, the Delisle's silent brother. The Delisle carbine did not emerge from a vacuum. It was part of a broader, top-secret effort within Britain's clandestine services to develop a family of silent weapons, each designed for a specific and deadly purpose. While the Delisle was the tool for the silent sniper, its smaller, even more discreet sibling was the Welrod pistol. If the Delisle was a whisper, the Welrod was the silence that followed a held breath. Developed at the innocuously named Inter-Services Research Bureau, which was in reality Station 9, the SOE's Research and Development Center, the Welrod was a weapon stripped to its barest essentials. It looked less like a pistol and more like a simple metal tube or a mechanic's grease gun. This was entirely by design. Its anonymous appearance meant it could be hidden or dropped without immediately being identified as a weapon. The Wellrod was a manually operated, bolt-action pistol. The operator had to twist and pull a rear cap to extract a spent cartridge and push it forward to chamber a new round. This deliberate, slow process made it completely unsuited for a firefight, but that was never its purpose. Its purpose was close-quarters assassination. The name itself was a nod to its origins, WEL from Welwyn, the town where Station 9 was located, and rod for its cylindrical shape. Like its larger cousin, the Wellrod's lethality was wrapped in silence. Its integrated suppressor was a marvel of simple, yet effective, design. It contained a series of rubber and felt wipes. When the pistol was fired, the bullet passed directly through these wipes, which sealed behind it, trapping the explosive gases. The result was a sound so quiet, it was often described as a faint cough or a quiet hiss. However, this extreme stealth came at a cost. The rubber wipes inside the suppressor were only effective for a very small number of shots, perhaps 15 at most, before they became worn and the weapon's report grew louder. The Wellrod was a disposable tool for a single, critical mission. An agent would use it to eliminate a guard, a sentry, or a high-value target in a quiet location, and then discard the weapon. SOE agents and resistance fighters across occupied Europe carried the Wellrod. It could be concealed easily up a sleeve or inside a coat. In Denmark, resistance members used Wellrods to execute collaborators and Gestapo informants in public places, sometimes in broad daylight, melting back into the crowd before anyone realized a shot had been fired. It was the ultimate weapon of terror and deniability, a ghost gun for a secret war. The Delisle and the Wellrod were two sides of the same coin. The carbine provided the ability to strike silently from a distance, clearing a path for saboteurs or eliminating an officer from across a street. The pistol provided the means for up-close, personal work, for operations in confined spaces where absolute discretion was paramount. Together, they formed a silent toolkit that gave British and Allied special forces a unique and terrifying advantage, allowing them to operate with a level of stealth that their enemies could barely comprehend. They were the Silent Brothers, born of desperation and ingenuity, and they left an indelible mark on the history of clandestine warfare. Post-war assassins, the carbine's Cold War secrets. The end of the Second World War did not mean the end of the Delisle carbine service. The world had changed, and the open battlefields of Europe gave way to the shadowy proxy wars and simmering conflicts of the Cold War. In this new era of espionage and counterinsurgency, the Delisle's unique capabilities were more valuable than ever. The weapon, once a secret of the SOE, was absorbed into the arsenals of Britain's most elite and secretive units, including the Special Air Service, or SAS. Its next tour of duty was in the dense, sweltering jungles of Malaya. During the Malayan emergency in the 1950s, British and Commonwealth forces were locked in a brutal guerrilla war against communist insurgents. The insurgents were masters of the jungle, using their knowledge of the terrain to launch ambushes and then vanish. For the SAS patrols operating deep in the jungle, noise discipline was a matter of life and death. A single gunshot could betray their position, bringing the full force of the enemy down upon them. Here, the Delisle carbine proved invaluable. It was used to silently eliminate sentries guarding insurgent camps, allowing SAS troopers to gather intelligence or launch surprise attacks. It was the perfect tool for a war fought in the shadows, where the enemy was everywhere and nowhere at the same time. The carbine's quiet report did not startle the jungle wildlife, a crucial factor in maintaining stealth. The Delisle also saw service in the Korean War, another brutal conflict where close-quarters fighting and night raids were common. It was used by British commandos and other special units for trench raiding and for eliminating sentries along the heavily fortified front lines. In the freezing cold of the Korean winter, the quiet crack of the Delisle was a harbinger of a swift, silent death for many an unsuspecting soldier. Perhaps the most mysterious chapter in the Delisle's post-war history is its rumored use during the Troubles in Northern Ireland. From the late 1960s through the 1990s, this complex and bitter conflict saw British forces engaged in a tense and often deadly struggle with paramilitary groups. In this environment of urban warfare, surveillance, and counter-terrorism, a weapon like the Delisle would have been a prized asset. While its use is shrouded in official secrecy, it is widely believed that the carbine was used by SAS teams and other specialist units for covert operations in Northern Ireland. It would have been the ideal weapon for observation posts, allowing soldiers to eliminate a threat without revealing their position or escalating a tense situation into a full-blown firefight. The ability to act with surgical precision and complete deniability was a powerful advantage in a conflict where every action was scrutinized and every casualty had political ramifications. The Delisle carbine, born in the crucible of the Second World War, had found a new life in the clandestine battlegrounds of the Cold War. It had become a weapon of the shadows, its service history as quiet and discreet as the weapon itself. Its continued use by the world's most elite special forces is a testament to the brilliance of its design. It was a weapon created for a specific purpose, and it continued to excel at that purpose long after the war for which it was built had passed into history. The unsung inventor, the man behind the silence. History remembers the weapons of war, but it often forgets the men who created them. William Godfrey Delisle was not a general or a politician, he was a quiet, unassuming engineer with a brilliant mind and a passion for invention. He was the unsung hero behind one of the most innovative firearms of the Second World War, yet his name is known to few. Delisle's story did not begin or end with his famous carbine. He was a prolific inventor, his mind constantly buzzing with new ideas. Before the war, he had worked on everything from aircraft components to soundproofing materials. His work in acoustics and his love of firearms were the two passions that would eventually converge to create the Delisle carbine. Even as he was perfecting his silent rifle, he was working on other, equally audacious projects for the war effort. He designed a .22 caliber machine gun that he claimed could fire at a rate of 1,000 rounds per minute, a weapon intended for training but with clear potential for other applications. He also developed plans for a silenced 9mm machine gun, a weapon that could have revolutionized commando tactics had it ever gone into full production. Delisle was not a man who sought fame or recognition. He was driven by a sense of duty and a desire to use his skills to help his country in its hour of need. He was a friend of Major Holland of the famed gunmakers Holland and Holland, and he moved in circles where innovation and craftsmanship were highly valued. Yet, he remained a humble figure, more comfortable in his workshop than in the corridors of power. When the war ended, Delisle faded back into relative obscurity. He had requested permission to patent his silencer design in the United States and the Soviet Union, a testament to his belief in its commercial potential. But the world was moving on, and the era of secret, handmade weapons was giving way to the mass production of the Cold War. His original .22 caliber prototype, the rifle he had used to hunt rabbits on the Berkshire Downs, was donated to Britain's National Army Museum. In a sad and ironic twist of fate, this priceless piece of history was subsequently lost, its whereabouts unknown to this day. It is a fittingly mysterious end for the first creation of a man who dealt in secrets and silence. William Delisle's legacy is not just the carbine that bears his name. It is a legacy of quiet innovation, of a man who saw a problem and, using his unique skills and a healthy dose of unconventional thinking, created a solution that was both elegant and deadly. He was one of the many unsung heroes of the war, a man whose contribution was not measured in battlefield victories, but in the silent, unseen successes of the shadow warriors who used his remarkable invention. He was the man who gave silence a voice, and that voice echoed through the secret history of the 20th century. Modern tributes, rebuilding a silent legend. The legend of the Delisle carbine did not die with the end of the Cold War. In fact, in the world of firearms collectors and historical enthusiasts, its mystique has only grown. With only around 130 ever made by Sterling Armaments, an original Delisle is one of the rarest and most sought-after military firearms in the world. They are the prized possessions of museums and a few lucky private collectors, commanding astronomical prices whenever one comes up for auction. This rarity, combined with the carbine's compelling history and unique design, has created a strong demand for modern reproductions. In recent years, a handful of specialist manufacturers, particularly in the United States, have taken up the challenge of recreating this silent legend. Rebuilding the Delisle is no simple task. It is not a matter of just retooling a factory production line. The originals were largely hand-built, with parts carefully fitted and modified. The modern gunsmiths who create these reproductions are part artisan, part historian. They must pore over the original drawings and patent documents, study the few surviving examples, and meticulously recreate the complex internal workings of the silencer. Companies like Valkyrie Arms and Special Interest Arms have become known for their faithful reproductions. They take original Lee Enfield actions, just as was done during the war, and carefully convert them. They machine new barrels, build the intricate silencer baffles, and fashion the custom magazine wells. The result is a firearm that is not just a copy, but a tribute to the genius of William Delisle's original design. For the enthusiasts who buy these modern reproductions, owning one is about more than just having a quiet rifle. It is about holding a piece of history in their hands. It is about connecting with the stories of the SOE agents and the commandos who carried these weapons into the darkness. Firing a Delisle reproduction on a quiet range is an almost eerie experience. The loud crack that one expects from a rifle is replaced by a gentle cough and the metallic sound of the bolt being worked. It is an audible link to the past, a tangible reminder of a time when silence was the deadliest weapon of all. The enduring fascination with the Delisle carbine is a testament to its status as a true icon of firearms design. It was a weapon born of necessity, a perfect marriage of form and function. Its story is a compelling mix of secret history, audacious innovation, and battlefield effectiveness. And as long as there are people who appreciate the art and science of firearms, the silent legend of the Delisle carbine will continue to be told, and its unique design will continue to be celebrated and recreated. In war, appearances can deceive, and sometimes the smallest weapon changes history.